Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, I heard a lot about you and listened to a few podcast episodes and stuff.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks, man. Yeah, I've listened to a few of yours as well. You and I and maybe a couple other people were a bit early on the DJ podcast game. Like, there's a fair number of them now, but yeah, I don't know. How long have you been doing yours?
The first episode was in mid 2019.
Okay, gotcha.
How about you?
I started mine in 2017, I think it was.
Oh shit! Like, so you were like way ahead of it.
Yeah. I was super early. There really weren't any when I started mine. It was kind of like I've said this on the podcast a million times, so people know, but I listened to a lot of comedians' podcasts and got really inspired by that and kind of just wondered why no one was doing that for the world I was in, which, as you know as well as me, it's like, full of interesting characters and crazy people and, people with good stories and all of that. So that's really what it was for me. What was it for you? What was the inspiration to start yours?
Same kind of thing. I listen to a lot of comedian podcasts. I listen to like some philosophical ones and some political ones, and I just like enjoyed them a lot. And I kind of had thought about doing it for a long time, since probably around 2017 also, but just didn't decide to do it because I was like, every time I would think about it, I'm like, well, fuck, how much extra work is that like taking on and all this kind of stuff. But then I met this guy who said he was down to edit it. He like approached me and was like, yo, you should do a podcast. I'll edit it and everything and distribute it. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about doing that for a while. So yeah, let's do it. And I think the first one that I knew about and listened to in the like electronic music industry was, what was his name? Matt, blank on his name. Mousetrap guy, Matt Lange.
Okay.
And yeah, he had one called Tap Tempo. And I listened to that a few times, and I think he only did like 10 episodes, and then he like binned it because it was just too much extra work. And but I really enjoyed those episodes, and so I decided, I'm going to start my own podcast now that I have like some support to do it.
No, that's great, man. Yeah, that's. I was chuckling when you were saying like, oh, how much you were worried about how much work it could be, and then I think, at least for me, I had the same worry, and then it turned out it was actually even more work than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, you can never have like the full amount of insight for something that you've never done, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And it's never something, I think you and I both, I think we can pat ourselves on the back at this point that we've sort of developed into, at least passable podcast hosts, but it's never something I felt like, oh, I'd be really good at that, Yeah,
no, I guess I didn't feel that way either. I just sort of felt like I know a lot of interesting people, and really what makes a good podcast is the guests. And
yeah, so
I thought I'm probably able to get some pretty cool guests and interesting guests, and I think I've done that. And yeah,
what was like an early episode of your podcast that really stood out to you? Maybe one where you were like, oh, this episode elevated it to the next level of like what I thought it could be.
Well, the very first one was with Andrew Huang, who's like a pretty big YouTuber, and I thought that would be a good place to start because he already has like a pretty big online presence and stuff. So it'd be a good first episode. And so when I actually launched it, I had no plan to to record an episode the day that we did. I was just with him in Toronto and decided like, oh, this would be a great opportunity to like just start my podcast. Like we're in his studio. I'm like, let's record a conversation. And he was down. So, but I think like a few of the ones that did a little bit better and kind of put the podcast on the map a little more was definitely deadmau5, Steve Duda, Mick Gordon, Richard Devine, like all these kind of heady people that don't, apart from deadmau5, I guess, don't have like too many like long form podcast interviews out there. So I think it was cool to get those kind of people.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, even deadmau5 doesn't do a lot of that. He'll pop up every once in a while, but I think that's pretty rare.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I got really lucky to be able to chat with him.
Had you known him for a while before that?
Yeah, we had written some music together, and like I'd been to his house and hung out with him, and we'd chatted a bunch on like the internet and stuff. So yeah, I knew him. But yeah, it was cool to get him on the podcast, and yeah, like you said, he doesn't have too many of those. I know he did one with H3. I know he did one with Joe Rogan, but yeah, he doesn't have a ton of them. I don't think.
But yeah, man, sorry. Anyway, I didn't mean to like jump into nerding out about all this stuff. I figured since you do podcasts, I can skip some of the normal spiel I have to give people about the show. But I'm really happy you're here, man.
Yeah, thanks for doing this as well. I don't know exactly. Was this through Monstercat or something? I don't really understand.
I believe it was through Monstercat, yeah. So you've got the new album with Monstercat. Have you worked with them in the past, or is this a new link up for you?
I've worked with them in like a pretty limited capacity in the past. I have released previously to this album 2 collabs with Infected Mushroom, which have both been released through Monstercat, but I have never done a direct release with them. This is the first one. But yeah, I kind of just felt like as I was writing the album, like at some point, I just kind of had this like epiphany, like, oh, this would make a lot of sense to put on Monstercat. It kind of sounds like it's bordering on the line, in my opinion, of sort of what I normally do, which is, I would say, kind of just like weirder bass music stuff and the EDM side. So I was like, maybe this is like just enough across that EDM line that they might take it, and they did, which was awesome.
I think of you as somebody who's very prolific. You put out a lot of music over the course of your career. And it's interesting hearing you sort of describe how you see this album in your canon, your body of work. I mean, when you're putting together an album at this point in your career, it's sort of a weird question, but I mean, does it feel different than other albums? Like for you, making an album, does it feel like a new idea, a new project? Or is it sort of you've been working on music constantly and you sort of notice trends about all the stuff you've been making recently? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely the later. I never go like, I'm working on a new album. Here's the concept, and here's what track 1's going to sound like, and then here's what track 2's going to sound like. And as a like zoomed out body of work, this is what it's going to look like. It definitely doesn't happen like that. I just like work on music all the time. And then, like you said, I notice trends. I go like, oh, this, track and that track and this sort of idea, like they all just feel like a family to me, and they feel like they work together. And so I put all of those in a folder out of my project files folder. I just sort of start throwing stuff in that folder that feels like a family. And then at some point after I've been doing that for a while, like, a few months or a year or something like that, I kind of go like, oh yeah, there's an album here, and then I can sort of see the picture, like the final product at that point, but I can never see it from like a point of having nothing started for it. It takes a lot of just messing around and stuff, and then eventually it just happens to form. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of like, I wouldn't say jealous, but I don't really understand how people can be like, oh, I'm going to write an album and envision the entire thing from start to finish and then execute it. Like my brain does not work that way.
I find that kind of thing very impressive, because some people can do that. But I also like what you're talking about, because your album is, for anyone who doesn't know, is mechanomorphic, and there is kind of a I don't know if we want to say philosophical or like aesthetic thing behind it, like that name, the intersection of, human and technology. And like, there are sort of some deeper thoughts behind it, but correct me if I'm wrong. What I like about what you're saying is that, you just make the music first without any of those deeper thoughts. And then it's almost like the results of you just sort of being purely creative can actually tell you what the theme of the album is. Like, it doesn't have to be a thought out cerebral thing. It can all come from that same sort of creative source. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that like the concept of the album is something that I kind of attached to it after a while of working on it. It's not something I attached to it prior to working on it. And that is something that I do want to explore one day, is like coming up with a bunch of like presuppositions of like what something should be, and what the concept of it's going to be and all this kind of stuff, and then executing on it, like going in a linear fashion, or maybe not so linear, but like some more linear than now. Yeah, it's something that I do want to experiment with, but yeah, I think at this point I have never done that. It's always, like I said, get to a point where I just have a bunch of music and then feel like it works as an album, and then I think like, well, what has been my sort of main thing that I've been thinking about whilst making this music at like a sort of fundamental level. And really at the fundamental level of all of these tracks was, I was just constantly thinking about like how the relationship between me and the computer, or any human and any technology, kind of has this like symbiotic IO relationship where the technology influences you in certain ways, and then you are influenced to do certain things in the technology, which then changes the state of you and the technology. And then it just kind of creates this input-output relationship. And that's kind of what Mechanomorphic is about. And I feel like that's super important, or it's like a very obvious idea right now with AI, right?
Yeah, with AI, and I think even before sort of the modern era, if we can say that, of AI, like the last couple of years, even before that, we were seeing it, I think, with like social media algorithms. And I wanted to ask you kind of along those same philosophical lines, your thoughts on that, because I think the social media algorithm stuff, it is that feedback loop, right? Where it guesses what you want to see. And if it guesses correctly, then it shows you more of that sort of thing. And everyone gets these tailored feeds. But I think, and again, I'm not saying any new ideas here, but it's gotten out of control to where people are, getting like put in a hole of an echo chamber kind of thing, and not being shown anything that, it's like only reinforcing certain tendencies, sometimes getting radicalized, that sort of thing. And it seems like that back and forth relationship has gotten a little imbalanced at this point, and that maybe our brains have lost the ability to evolve as quickly as the technology is evolving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think that our brains are evolving as fast as the technology is. Though I do think that probably our brains are evolving faster than they would, and adapting faster than they would if the technology didn't exist, though not necessarily saying that that's a good thing. But I think the human body and the brain is pretty good at adapting to things in general. It's kind of like if you do exercise, the first time you do it, if you haven't done it in a while, it kicks your ass, and then eventually your body adapts. The same with mental tasks. It's like if you write music for the first time, you might look in Ableton and get like completely overwhelmed. And then the next time you come back, slightly less overwhelming, and slightly less and slightly less. It's like the more that you learn about it and the more that you do it, the more of kind of like an understanding of it you have, and more of a tolerance that you build to it. And I feel like that's probably happening with social media. And I hope that we like develop a more mature relationship with social media in the future, and it becomes less divisive, and people, hating on each other less and stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think, I mean, my pessimistic opinion is that it's going to get worse before it gets any better, probably. But I do also have that same hope as you eventually. I think it's just, I think we need to, whatever the era after the algorithm era is going to be, I think we need to get there quickly. Because that, to me, as long as it's about, getting likes and getting, sort of like points online for saying things that draw people's eyes or get clicks, that to me seems like not exactly a fixable system. But I am totally open to the idea that there are some great social media systems out there. It's just, I'm not seeing them right now, and I'm not smart enough to invent them.
What if we invented like AI arbiters who would sort of, scan all of social media for any argument that's been had in the past, and then also scan like all news sources and all journals and all like papers that have been released and for facts, right? And then there's just kind of these like AI arbiter agents that sort of jump in mid-comment section and go like, actually, you're wrong.
I mean, it sounds funny when you say it, but I think that's probably some version of that is going to be part of whatever comes next. I mean, almost certainly that's going to start happening in some way in our social media.
I think that would be, so long as everybody like trusted that as an arbiter and was like, well, the AI knows best, then like I think
that's the thing.
It could actually solve a lot of things. Though, probably what you would see is these all-knowing AI arbiters that just have like dog shit amounts of fucking information injected into them, coming in and being like, well, actually, this is how it is. And then just some person being like, fucking, I don't believe the AI.
And there's like, the thing, it all has to do with what information they're trained on and who's like writing the algorithms that they use to train. I mean, I just keep thinking about how it's like every AI in the modern era, like eventually says something racist or, it's like there's just not enough. I think it has to be a balance between having the guardrails on an AI enough so that it's not fully just going off and, saying something horrible or complete misinformation, but giving it enough free rein that it is able to ingest enough information that, it actually does have some kind of full picture of whatever the topic is. For me, this is like a lizard talking about how the internet works. Like I don't, for me, like I am not a coder, I'm not an engineer. So my analysis of this is sort of very surface level kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Same. But yeah, I would say the thing that would be tough to do is if you were to have an AI arbiter like that, like whose ideals is it trained on to be like, this is good and this is bad? Because if it takes a lot of information from, say, like, if it takes 50% of the information from like the right wing and say 50 from the left wing, then maybe it'll be somewhat even. But if like they skew that data even by a little bit, like the right is 55% and the left is 45%, then it's like all of a sudden you've got sort of an unbalanced thing. Yeah, it's a really hard problem to solve, but I've thought about this a few times, and I think maybe that might be something that we see.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not sure. I think that's going to be something good that I'm looking forward to. But I do think that you're right that we are going to see some form of it in the future, and that's probably what's next up. You're probably right. I mean, if we like focus this kind of grand discussion more on music and technology, because I feel like, I mean, you're a highly technical music producer. I think of you in like a top tier as far as like sound design and engineering and just interesting sonic ideas. Have you been messing around with any of the new like AI tools for music?
Yeah, I'm like somewhat obsessed with them at the moment. It's like, to me, the most interesting thing since I found out about like wavetable synthesis or granular synthesis. It's like, it's a new mode of synthesis that we just haven't seen. It just hasn't existed up until like, a year ago or 2 years ago. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on it at the moment. Basically, I've been using mostly this thing called dance diffusion, where you point it towards, you can train models and you can also have it generate sounds based on those models that you've trained. So you pretty much point it towards a folder of sounds, which would be the data set, and you tell it to just learn about that data. And I don't know exactly how, I had the guy on my podcast who invented this thing like last week. And the way that I always thought it was working was that it was converting all of the images to spectrograms, like images. And then it was using essentially image diffusion to look at those spectrograms. And then it was recreating images in the back end of similar looking spectrograms and then attaching that to a synthesizer and outputting it. But that's not how it works. It actually just works on audio diffusion. So it basically takes a piece of audio, covers it in 100% white noise, and then tries to get back to where it started. And then if it can't do it, it goes like, all right, well, let's try 99% white noise, and then tries to get back from there. And then it goes, well, that didn't work. Let's try 98% white noise. And it just does this like hundreds of millions of times, or however many. And then eventually it knows how to take any audio, smother it in white noise, and then get a thing out. So you basically point it towards a folder of sounds, be like, do the thing with the white noise that you do, and then at the end you get a model, like a .ckpt file, and you reload it in and you just say, make me these, and it will just generate you those. So it's pretty cool. And the kind of the way that you tweak it is not with parameters. The way that you tweak it is with the data set. So if you're like, okay, I want like a mixture of say 50% virtual riot bases and 50% Willy Joy bases, then the way that you would tweak that to get that output is you would create a folder of bases that are 50% yours and 50% virtual riots, and then train it on that. And you can also interpolate between two different models. So you could train a model on 100% Willy Joy bases and 100% virtual riot bases, and then put both of them in and tell it to give you a mixture. Be like, give me 10% Willy Joy, 90% virtual riot, or 80% Willy Joy, 20% virtual riot. And yeah, so I've been pretty stoked on that. Lately.
And the output is it's pretty good. Like it'll just give you really interesting, variations, or it will sound like what you're asking it for, basically.
Yes, depending on the data set. If you give it a shitty data set, you're going to get shitty output. But if you curate the data set really well to where there's like not much silence in the data, and to where like it's pretty loud because it doesn't do well on quiet stuff due to like the nature of it smothering shit in white noise, then yeah, you can get some pretty solid outputs out of it, like just as solid as, splice samples and stuff.
That's interesting. What was it called again?
It's called Dance Diffusion. Yeah, it's by a company called Harmon AI, like harmony, but with AI at the end.
Oh, is that Zach's thing?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Zach
Yeah.
Evans,
I don't think I knew he had named it that. Man, yeah, I've known Zach forever.
Oh, true. Yeah. He was the one I had on the podcast. He's awesome.
That was sick. He's great. I love him, man. Shout out to Zach.
How do you know Zach?
He and I was kind of a pandemic relationship. I was streaming a lot around then, and he was hopping in some of the streams, and we got to know each other through that. We were on a couple different Discords together, and we still never met in person. But it was just one of those where like we clicked pretty fast, and just similar sense of humor, and I always got a kick out of him. And then, from there, I haven't talked to him too much in like the last year, but I knew he was working on a lot of different like AI related projects. So it's cool he's actually getting them out there.
One thing I will say that I do not agree with in the AI stuff is this like kind of gray area that we're in terms of training data, like in terms of the data sets. For example, like Sora, right? Like the one of the people at OpenAI was interviewed, and somebody asked them like, where'd you get all the data to train on Sora? Did you get it from YouTube? And they just wouldn't answer the question. So in my opinion, that's almost like 100% a yes. We did just scrape videos from YouTube to train this on. And that new thing, Udio, that just came out, I'm like almost certain that they've just scraped data and trained it up. But the thing is there's no laws right now for doing that.
I know.
So it's not illegal. It's like, it's a gray area because it doesn't necessarily like break copyright law. And there just has been nothing, as far as I know at this time, passed about that. So I'm curious what's going to happen to these companies. Like, are these companies like OpenAI and Udio going to get like hammered extremely hard in the near future when there's a law passed, or are they just going to get a slap on the wrist and be like, oh, you didn't know that copying hundreds of millions of gigabytes of data and training a model on it and selling it for money was illegal?
Yeah, it could be one of those things where the laws just don't evolve fast enough to catch up to them too. Like it makes me think about, how Uber and Lyft would launch in new cities when those were still new companies, and they just sort of parachute into major cities without any permits, without any laws allowing them to have this model. And by the time the laws caught up with them to try to regulate it, it was so integrated into the way the city worked. It was kind of too late to stop them,
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's got to be a tough thing as a regulator, right? To be like, shit, what do we do now? Now that it's a thing that exists.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I don't know anything about obviously making a law itself, but it has to go through so many levels of approval. And if it's going to be a permanent change to the way like a business operates in America, then of course you have to be super careful that you're not overreaching or that you're not missing some loophole that could be exploited. I mean, it's got to be a nightmare of a job.
Yeah, I had a lawyer on my podcast recently, and he was saying one thing that's being talked about in courts a lot at the moment is training an AI model infringing on copyright law? Because technically, like, if I take one of your songs on my hard drive and I literally just make a copy of the file, I'm breaking copyright law right there, and you can sue me. Nobody does this because, like, A, it's not causing anybody any problems, and B, nobody even knows about it. Like, if I just make a copy on my personal hard drive, like, it's pretty rare that you would know that I've done that. But technically that is like the copyright law. You're just not allowed to make copies of files. So they're saying, like, is it a breach of copyright law at the point when you put it into the AI and train a model on it? Like, is that they're making a copy? And if it is, then technically it would breach copyright law, which is a law that we already have and have had for a long time.
Yeah, we're in uncharted waters for sure. I mean, everything feels a little crazy, a little out of hand. I mean, even for, I don't know. I was about to say music too, although now I'm not sure I agree with that. The music landscape, I mean, other than sort of technological changes, which I think as people who make electronic music, you kind of always have to go with the waves of new technology or else you just get left behind. So that's not anything new. Do you feel like in general in the music landscape, do you feel like it's wildly different than it was 5-10 years ago for you, for like the way you operate?
For the way I operate, not really. Same kind of things apply. Like you said, I'm always trying to find new technologies, new ways of doing things, trying to write cooler music, trying to make my live show better, like all this kind of stuff. And that's not really, like, on that level, it's not different. I would say it's different in the sense that electronic music is a lot bigger now than it was, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. To the point now where, like, it's basically like pop music, it's so big now that there's such a reward for doing well in it that I think we're seeing, a large level of, for lack of a better term, like competition in electronic. Like, it's always been a competitive industry, and like any industry really, but I feel like that's more true now than ever. And for people just starting out, trying to like get their name out there and stuff, I feel like it's maybe in some ways easier, some ways harder today than it's ever been.
Would you agree with this? This is something I've been thinking about lately, because I agree with you, but I also have this theory that electronic music is kind of mirroring the way society is going in general, where there's more opportunity at the top. Like the ceiling has gotten raised to a crazy amount where, like, the people at the top are making unbelievable amounts of money and fame and kind of anything you would want out of that. But I think for the middle class of electronic musicians, it has maybe gotten a little harder. I think that's maybe more of a grind than it used to be, a little less sustainable to kind of just maintain at that mid-level for a long time.
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you think that that's coming from the music industry, or is that coming from, say, like economy-related stuff, such as flights are now ridiculously expensive and food is getting more expensive? It's like, just to do a show now, to go fly somewhere and do a show, the costs are just way higher than they used to be. But
absolutely, I mean, it's not necessarily because of RC, and you're right, but I think it is sort of, we're seeing the same thing happening in RC and that is happening in larger society. And so it's interesting because I think you're right that there's more competition than ever. And even at a young level, people are really good out the gates. Like, there's so much good music being made. But I think we're seeing people sort of go through the cycles and the waves faster. And like more people crashing and burning faster, where they maybe could have had more time to kind of, get their business in order, figure out their whole thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The like level of how good you have to be now to, for somebody to consider it to be good music now is a lot higher, or to be well produced music at least. And yeah, I think that's just because like a lot of the kids who are getting into it have just had technology from day one. So it's kind of just baked into their brain as like second nature, and they pick up things extremely quickly. And I think that's a good thing overall. I mean, it's the music that you get to listen to is now of a lot higher quality. And I think that it's never been easier now. It's never been easier ever to put your music on a streaming platform and get it in front of people and collect royalties on that. And it's never been easier to connect with your fans. Like there's a lot of stuff that is, but with all of that has come this like level of white noise essentially that you're trying to fight over.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult part now. And I think now, because like everyone's music is so sick, like that's just not enough anymore. You have to have like a brand behind it. You have to have a story. You have to have like this whole sort of like universe around surrounding your project that, elicits this entire experience and vibe. And yeah, that's kind of a little tricky to do. And that's kind of honestly where I see AI going, is I think that eventually we're going to end up with, all of a sudden everyone's a professional musician, a professional video editor, a professional programmer, a professional web developer, because they just have like tools to do all of these things at a pretty high professional level with these AI tools. And I think what we're going to see is this creative use of like mashing up all of those tools to create something at a really high level on all fronts. And, eventually there's going to be, ChatGPT manager who's just going to like do all of your bookings and figure out like, reach out to people for collabs for you and set up podcasts for you and stuff like it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, man, you're right. It's going to be wild. There's so much of that where in my mind I'm like, it's going to go so poorly. But then, because what I want this is the last thing I'll say about AI. The only thing I want, the singular thing I want out of AI tools is things that allow me to get to the creative part faster, to execute the ideas I'm already having faster, to, maybe give me some prompts that spark creativity.
Yeah, I feel that. I've had this thought so many times where I'm like, I more so earlier on in my career, I don't really think about this too much anymore. But like there was like years and years there of where I was like, fuck, I want to make house music now. I want to make glitch music now, IDM, downtempo. I want to make bangers now. And I thought about starting separate projects for all of them. But I figured at some point, it's all just like an expression of the shit that I want to do, which is honestly a mess. Like my creative process is a mess, and like so my project should just display that, I think, and I should just like own who I am as a creative and
absolutely just, there's a level of authenticity I think people find appealing to that. And if you're anything like me, because I'm the same, I like to make a lot of different styles of music and I listen to a lot of different kinds of music and appreciate it. I don't know if you're like this, but for me, since I was a kid, it's been this way. Like I see it connected in my brain very simply, like, moving from one style to another sound to another genre. For me, it all makes sense in my brain, and it always has, just sort of automatically in a way that never really needed explaining for me. And so I think if you're anything like that, then I think it's just an authentic expression of sort of how you see the world and how you see music. And I feel like at this point, I mean, you're well established. The people who like what you do probably like the fact that you keep it varied.
It's funny because I've come to like almost the exact opposite viewpoint of what you just said.
Great. Tell me about it, please.
So when I look at my work, I see like completely different stuff, right? I'm like, this is a house song and it's completely different to this like drum and bass song and it's completely different to this song. But like when other people listen to my work, I notice quite often people like, it doesn't matter what you do, it sounds like Mr. Bill. Right. And to me, like I kind of see that, and I see that more these days than I did back in the day. But back in the day, I was like, oh man, all my stuff sounds so different. How could I even possibly mix this all into a single 1 hour set or something? But these days, I'm a little better at just being like, it all sounds like Mr. Bill music. But I don't know. It's like when you're concentrating on the details of something, it's harder to see the bigger picture. And for example, like, I don't know, if you were a cheetah or something like that, you're covered in black dots. And to us, all cheetahs look the same. They're just like a cat with black dots on them, right? But if you're a cheetah, you'd be like, oh my God, that one has a dot there. No way. Crazy.
That's so funny. I never thought about that. All humans are racist against cheetahs. It's like they all look the same to me.
Right?
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I feel
crazy.
the same with my music though, kind of. Like, because I'm looking at the details of it so often, I'm so like aware of the differences.
Right.
Whereas I feel like other people may be looking at it just from a sort of wider view lens, maybe don't see that detail. And to them, it's just Mr. Bill doing us, Mr. Bill doing this, Mr. Bill doing that.
Yeah, because I think, especially if you're a fan of somebody and you listen to a lot of their work, you know, if I think about your work, in my mind, it's not about necessarily the genre. It's more about, I think that you have a certain sense of rhythm. I think it's sort of smaller creative decisions that, regardless of like what the bigger genre is, there's still, whatever it is, that pocket or, you know, that sort of like a quirky choice in the middle of the song, just like smaller moments that I feel like maybe people lock into if they've been listening to you for a long time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think where that comes from, like, why, have you ever thought about like why it is that like I sound like Mr. Bill and why it is that you sound like Willy Joy? And do you have a theory on that?
I mean, it's fascinating. I think about it all the time. I think it's impossible to answer because I think it's the same as like, why is your personality the way it is and why is mine the way it is, where it's the result of so many tiny, unique experiences that we've had in our lives. It's the unique brain chemistry we were given at birth. It's, genetic history. Like it's way too much, I think, to summarize, but I love talking about it. Do you have a theory?
Yeah, I think the three big categories that you can summarize it into is biological, environmental, and peer influence. So biological would be like, the shape of your ear, like the shape of your pinna, the length of your ear canal, like the shape of your head, all that kind of stuff.
So the way that sound waves are actually hitting your body and entering your body, that's interesting.
Correct. But also I think that is only as important as then how your brain interprets that information too. And I guess we would all do that differently. The other thing that I think is important is your environment. Like, for instance, if you live in like a really quiet area, electronic music is not a thing, versus if you live like right in the CBD of a city and house music is huge or something like that. I feel like also just the environmental noise, I find personally, influences the kind of music I'm writing. If I'm in like a very quiet sort of suburban area, I'm more likely to get more detail oriented about music than if I'm in a city where I can hear like buses and stuff outside, where I'm like less detail oriented and more sort of about like the riffs and the, the things that are important to me are things that are kind of like louder than that noise floor. And then the other thing that I think is mega important, at least in my experience, has been peer influence. Like what people around me think is cool is naturally what I'm going to gravitate towards and think is cool.
Of course,
but it's obviously a lot more than that. But I think that those three things I've noticed personally have been like big influence. At least I think they're the biggest influences.
I think so too. And I think one thing I talk about a lot on here is like early experiences with music. And I think through the lens of those three pillars you just were talking about, I think any of those that happen to you when you're young, or any of those where you have a formative experience, being young is like a multiplier for those influences. It's interesting for you even, like, what kind of did you grow up in a loud place, in a quiet place? Did you have peers who were showing you music early on that was influencing you? Like, what was going on early through the lens of those three pillars?
Well, so environmentally, I lived sort of out in a pretty quiet suburban area, and it was like an hour north of Sydney. And I did have a lot of peers who were into music, but they were mostly into metal and rock and stuff like that. So early on, I was into stuff like Tool and Metallica and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I would say that has influenced at least my sense of rhythm, because I was super into like mathy metal shit when I was younger, and I also played drums for a bit, and I played guitar for a bit, and I definitely enjoyed that sort of technical rhythm aspect of music, and I think that when I found electronic music, I think that was the original thing that I loved about it, was that the rhythms are like spot on perfect. There's no like drummer who just played slightly tighter than whatever. It's just that perfect. You can't.
Yeah. So well, and what's fun about that too, though, is I think now in the modern day, your music has such a cool sense of rhythm and bounce and pocket. And it's certainly not what I would think of as like perfectly quantized 100% of the time. But what I like about that, I was just listening to somebody else talking about the importance of this, is that you kind of have to learn the rules before you can start breaking them in interesting ways. So it's kind of cool to think about you being initially attracted to sort of the robotic, like exactly, perfectly in time nature of electronic music. And then you sort of getting to that point and then evolving beyond it to where you can sort of play with people's expectations of what that could sound like.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever thought that music you can completely reduce it to an art form where you set expectations and then either meet them or don't?
That's such a great theory, and it's such a effective way of like communicating an idea to humans. I mean, I think that's true for a lot of different forms of art, right? Like great movies do that, great books do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's basically what we're doing. It's kind of like but again, I will say you have to get good enough at just doing the basic thing first before you can introduce a turn or an unexpected part or a surprise, because people have to buy sort of the primary idea first, and they have to trust you that you're presenting it correctly and in an interesting way, I think, before they will give you credit to then surprise them with a twist on that idea.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like so much of my writing these days is like, all right, I'm like setting up, there's a whole setup like you would in a joke, and then there's a punchline. And it's like, I'm always trying to make the setup allude to something and then make the punchline meet that expectation, but slightly differently in a way that it didn't expect.
Oh, dude, absolutely. Like I mean, I think that's a great lesson for any up and coming producers who are listening. Sort of philosophically, that's what all the greatest producers and musicians that we look up to do. It's why, you take somebody like Skrillex, universally loved, universally respected, and what he's doing, I mean, he's a genius. He's an incredible producer, but if you sit down and really listen to a lot of his songs, he's doing what you're talking about, where it's like, well, I can see how this is similar to a lot of popular music that's come before, or styles or genres, but then it's just that little flip, that little bit of uniqueness that he adds to it that transforms it into, these wild things that sort of on the surface sound like something you've never heard before, so fresh. But I think if you look at the core of it, it's like, oh no, these are based in established forms, in things that have, it's like he's done the research, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was Seth Godin maybe who said anything that gets like mega successful, in his opinion, it might not have been Seth Godin, but if someone said this, it's always like a copy of something that has existed before, but like slightly different. Yeah. And I think one of the analogies they made was like Metallica, for instance, super huge. It's basically just like rock music, but with country infused guitars. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's very,
and I feel
that's very interesting.
Skrillex is almost that way as well. It's like dubstep, but like with a pop music influence or something like that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's pop, sometimes it's hip hop, and then it's, all underpinned by the fact that he figured out how to be a, top tier sound engineer and producer before he started, putting out this kind of hybrid stuff. And yeah, man, it's funny when you break it down because it really isn't that complicated. It's kind of just, you have to put in the time to get really good at the thing. And then it's hard to do in the moment. Like, you can't just sit down and say, now I will think of two things that haven't been combined before. It doesn't really work like that. But when you look at all the successful examples, that is kind of what they did.
Yeah, probably not purposefully. Like, maybe
Right.
It's like, it seems like it's probably an accident and it's coming from a genuine, authentic place. But yeah, I guess you can reduce it down to that.
Well, let me ask you this to kind of reverse this conversation, because you, again, anybody who doesn't know, I mean, in addition to making great music, you do a lot of teaching. You do, there's a lot of your stuff on YouTube. You have a Patreon as well, is that right?
I kind of treat my website as my Patreon. It's MrBillsTunes.com. It's just like a website where I have courses, sample packs, Ableton Rack, Serum presets, like all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
like
so you brought it all in-house. But I just want to make sure that people know that. And so let me ask you this, as somebody who probably sees a lot of people's work and is asked for feedback, and you're, teaching and doing tutorials. In the modern era, like, are there qualities about new producers' work that immediately stand out to you, good or bad? Like, are there common mistakes you see people making? Are there things that really make you, stand at attention if somebody does it?
I would say the most common pitfall that I notice in beginners who have been making music for a few years or less is that, like, they'll make a loop and that loop will go for way too long, and they will just introduce sort of one element every 8 bars for 4 minutes or something like that, and it doesn't have a lot of dynamics to it. And what you really want to do is have a lot of in my opinion, what makes music interesting and cool to listen to is, like we said, it has these set expectations, but at the right times it's changing enough to keep your ear interested. And I find a lot of the sort of beginner stuff that I hear just doesn't have that amount of dynamic range. And when I say dynamic range, I don't mean in volume, I mean more in songwriting.
Yeah, and song structure, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's they'll carry on a section for too long, and to them, because they're probably listening to it a ton and maybe don't have the experience to have that zoomed out perspective on what that might sound like with fresh ears to somebody who's never listened to it before, is that they think that adding an element every so often kind of solves the problem. But it's not enough. They're too small of details for your brain to register it as oh, what the hell's happening now, And so, yeah, that level of excitement, I think, it really only, I'm not going to say it comes from experience. You can definitely, I think anyone can do it, but just making sure that there's enough change in the music, often enough, that it's going to keep someone listening excited and kind of, depending on the style. I mean, obviously with ambient music, you want almost the opposite of that, or with, maybe some forms of house or techno music, you kind of, or trance, for instance, you might want it to be the same for a long time because you want to get people into that sort of trancey state of mind or something. But yeah, that would be the biggest thing, I think, is dynamics in songwriting, which is, for me, was a really hard thing to learn.
Yeah, I think it was for me too. And I think that's it's a good note, because it's not necessarily what you're told to think about at the start, but you're right, it can really absolutely transform the way you hear a piece of music. I mean, for you now, in terms of everything that you do, like the sample packs, the tutorials, making your own music, playing shows, do you like the balance of where it's at right now? Are there parts you'd like to do more or less of?
I would say I'm pretty happy with the balance. I think I play too many shows. I would like to play less shows. Not like no shows. I've thought about like completely quitting shows before, and every time I think about it, I'm like, yeah, but then what about shows? So like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever. Well, I'm sure eventually I'll stop doing shows completely, but at the moment, I think I play a lot of shows that I don't want to play, and it's worth it. Like shows are worth it when the show is like fucking sick and everything's done right. The vibe is right. The right people are there. Like you've done the marketing correctly to get the right people in the room. It's your fans there. They want to see you. You've got a show that you're really proud of, like all that stuff. When that's all on point, it's the coolest shit ever, other than the travel, which I hate.
Of course.
Like planes and stuff like that suck ass. But yeah, so I mean, I think the thing that I enjoy more than anything is being in the studio, just noodling around. I would spend like every day just doing that if I could, and I do spend most of my time just doing that, and I love that. I love just noodling around, finding new techniques, finding new ways to like come up with interesting songs, coming up with new interesting sounds. Yeah, I would say that's kind of where I'm at with it. What about you? Like,
yeah, it's funny because to take us back to something we were saying earlier, I have kind of the exact opposite answer. Where for me, like I love DJing in a live setting. I love playing shows kind of more than anything, and so whatever I can do to get to doing that as much as possible is kind of what I want to do, and it's not that I don't enjoy any of the other parts, but it's just the amount that I enjoy playing a live show dwarfs kind of anything else in my life.
Nice. Yeah, this is one thing that I like really empathize with people who are just starting out, is like if you're coming into the music industry now and you're just getting like, you know, $500 offers to play shows, like I have no fucking idea how you're making that work, because like it's rough. Yeah, dude, like a flight these days is like, you know, almost most of that. And it's insane. I really do not understand how people are supposed to make it work. I'm hoping that the economy changes and that becomes possible again. But yeah,
I hope so too. Yeah. And I think a lot of, to use the phrase middle class DJs again, one thing I've been seeing from a bunch of them is, you know, they hold on to their day job longer than maybe you would have previously, and kind of just make it work that way where, yeah, maybe on the weekend they do just go and play for $500, but then they just, you know, Monday through Friday kind of grind it out at whatever they're doing and make it work that way, which sucks that they have to do that for longer periods of time. But, you know, I see people making it that way too.
Do you think that there's a sense of holding on to your day job that's healthy with the creative process? Like in the sense that if music becomes your primary source of income and you don't have any other sources of income, that may influence your creative process and the direction that you take your project in negative ways?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's good and bad things to say about it. I think the irony with doing any kind of creative career is, I think the longer you can do it purely as sort of a passion project and not think about it as a career, kind of the better your output will be in that time. Before, you know, it's your first time coming in, you're young, whatever you're doing, you're passionate about it, but you're not looking at it as a job. I think oftentimes that can get sort of the most exciting results off the bat. But you know, eventually, if you're doing it enough, then people will start wanting it from you, and it kind of naturally evolves into a career. But I think the longer you can kind of keep that at bay, I think it benefits creativity in a weird way. I don't know what I'm saying exactly, but do you know what I mean? Where it's like the second you start looking at it as a vocation, I think that sort of changes the way you do it subconsciously.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like when it's just something that you're making for fun because you enjoy it and you're passionate about it, and it's, you know, you're in this exploratory phase, you're just figuring stuff out, you're just doing whatever for the fuck of it because it's fun, is a completely different vibe to now I have to think about this from an economic perspective also. Like, how is this going to pay my rent this month? I need to I got this bill to pay, that bill to pay. I got this flight to book for this thing. And like, I got to get food and like all that. Yeah. As soon as like music becomes the thing that takes care of all of that for you, it's a completely different vibe for sure.
Did you have a day job at one point that you ended up leaving for music?
I didn't have one that I ended up leaving for music, but I have had day jobs in the past. Basically, my trajectory was when I was like 17, 18, I worked as a pizza delivery driver for a while.
Nice.
A security guard for a while. And that was pretty much my only two jobs. And then I quit those. And then I was like making music a little bit during those times, but not a ton. I was mainly playing guitar and drums and like, yeah, I didn't really even consider music as a career. And then after I quit those jobs, I was just living with my parents, and I was fortunate enough to have them sort of just like let me live with them until I was like 24 or so.
And was that all still in Australia?
Yeah, I didn't move to America until I was 26.
Okay.
I'm 35 now, so I've been here for almost 10 years. So after those two jobs, I kind of quit those. And then that's when I really got into Ableton, is after I quit those jobs. And then I was into Ableton for about a year. And then I decided to go to university in Sydney for audio engineering. I went to SAE. And then kind of during that period of university, which was about a 2-year, maybe 3-year, I can't remember, period, I started the website. I started putting information out on YouTube. I started doing all this stuff around that time. And kind of by the time I finished my degree, I was in a sort of a position to, like, I was playing some shows here and there and stuff like that. And I was making like enough money to pay rent with, like, I had a lot of housemates and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, that's interesting too. Am I correct in saying that you got known from your videos and like the website and all that almost either before or kind of simultaneously as people were knowing you for your music?
I think for sure at the start I was more known for my videos, and then I sort of become more known for music after that. It's because that's really where I was putting my energy in the beginning, was like pretty much just into like YouTube stuff, and I was like releasing some music as well, but mostly I was putting YouTube videos up at that point. And I put out a few EPs during that time, but they didn't really get like a ton of success or anything.
Well, the tutorials, not to cut you off, but I'm just curious, were you doing those, like the YouTube videos, kind of for the same reason we were talking about before? Like, was it just a fun thing to do?
It was just a fun thing to do. Yeah. I would learn something at university that I was like, holy shit, that's crazy that works. And then I would just I'd go home and make a video about it and put it online. Like, for instance, the first video I ever put out was delay time tricks, which was how to figure out the amount of milliseconds on a delay to match like a musical value to whatever BPM you're in. And I think I can't remember the exact math. I think it's 60,000 divided by the BPM equals like a quarter note or something like that. So I made a video about that just because I found that out that day at university and was like, what the hell? And
man, I feel like Grimes could have used that video in the modern era.
Oh, dude, I saw that Grimes Coachella set. I am of the opinion that that's a meta social media play to try and get attention. I don't think that was a legitimate fuck up. I think that was like a crazy meta marketing.
You think so? I mean, I saw somebody posted that there's older video of the same thing happening to her like a couple of years ago at a festival that just, I think maybe because it wasn't Coachella, it like didn't really take off, that video. But if you watch it, it's the same thing happening and she kind of has the same reaction.
In your opinion, like, what do you think happened? Like, you've watched the videos,
to be honest, I don't think she acted correctly in any of this, but I sort of take her at her word of that she had some assistant like prepping all the tracks for her in Rekordbox. They somehow messed up the prep, or Rekordbox had an error that they didn't catch. And so, and then she just didn't check anything, and they just handed her a USB, and she just walked on stage. Which,
but I'm asking, what do you think the technical problem was?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest. Like, Rekordbox to me is such an unreliable. Like, I'm not a big fan of Rekordbox, so I guess I didn't even think about it that far. I was like, oh, that checks out that it would just screw it up somehow.
So based on what she was saying, she's like, oh, all the numbers are double and I'm not good at doing math and therefore I can't make it work or whatever. And if I just don't get it, because like if all of the numbers were double, then you're fine. Like just the numbers are double, just mix as if 370 is now your BPM, but it should, if it's gridded at 370, be playing back at normal speed or whatever. But if it's like every second track is half the BPM of the first and so on, then I can see that being a little bit of a pain. It just means you can't use sync and you have to do a little bit of math to figure out what half of the original thing is and double the next one to be able to figure out like what the middle point is to mix or whatever. But yeah, I didn't really even understand the issue. I did read that tweet that she put out where she said, I got somebody else to record box my stuff and they messed it up and I'm sure they got fired the next day or something for it. But I just don't really understand. She didn't really explain what the problem was other than like during her set where she just kept saying she was bad at math and the numbers were double.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely did not have a good reaction. She was not handling that pressure well at all. But
I mean, I thought it was fine. That's not the part I had. I didn't really have an issue with any of it. I thought it was pretty funny, but I felt bad for her, if anything.
I mean, no, of course I feel bad for her, but it's like, yeah, I feel bad for her to the extent that I know what having technical problems on stage feels like, and that does suck.
It sucks. Yeah.
But I will say I don't feel bad for her in the sense that there were 10,000 DJs in the country that could have dealt with that problem who weren't on that stage. So in that sense, that's kind of where I draw the line for feeling bad for her.
Yeah, unfortunately, skill of DJing is not what gets you on the Coachella stage.
Yeah,
it's got to do with
so
like
much.
The social media marketing and the amount of fans.
I mean, she's a
I kept
wacko.
thinking, like, surely this is like a meta, like, because like if you see how many people are talking about it, it's like the only Coachella set I've seen talked about online is her set.
Well, and you know what's
she kept
interesting? I have some like old high school friends I still talk to all the time who are not in music at all. They live a totally different life, like not even music fans really. And so I think they saw on their feeds like some of that going viral, and they were asking me like, what is this? What's the deal with this? And in talking to them, I found out that they didn't even know that Grimes made music. Like they just thought she was kind of like a weird performance artist or just like weird celebrity. And I wonder if a lot of people like, because they're not dumb people, they're like totally normal, smart people. So I was like, I wonder if a lot of the public kind of just doesn't even know what she does at this point. Like it's been long enough and she's kind of just been this wacky figure where people see a video like that and they're just like, oh, that's just Grimes being Grimes.
Well, the other thing is, she kind of positions herself in the industry as like some tech lord, you know, like she's talking about like AI a ton and like creating all of these AI models and dating Elon Musk and all that. Like, how are you going to like position yourself as like some tech lord and then fuck up your record boxes?
Yeah, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should cover? I know you are doing some more tour dates. We talked about the album a bit. Is there anything else about the album, about the dates, about anything else you got coming up that we should mention?
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to find my dates, go to mrbillstunes.com/tour, TOUR. And for any music, just check me on Spotify. My new album is out on Monstercat. It's called Mechanomorphic. If you want to find out what I'm doing, go follow me on the internet. I'm just at Mr. Bill's Tunes everywhere. And you'll find out what you need to know from there if you want to.
Well, you've got a really impressive body of work over the years, man. And it's beyond the body of work and beyond sort of all the resources you provide for up and coming people, all of which are very impressive. But I'm also impressed, and this is maybe a way we can start wrapping it up, but just your consistency over the years is really impressive. I was reading some old like interviews and profiles of you getting ready for this, and I saw you mention a lot sort of the importance of consistency, the importance of like putting in the hours of doing it, sitting yourself down, making yourself do the work, whether you're excited to or not on a day-to-day basis. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's been doing it a long time, you were talking about how you still have this love of noodling around in the studio and you're still able to find the fun in it. One thing I like to talk about a lot on this is sort of, are there techniques you found to keep yourself happy, to avoid burning out, that you've learned over the years that you could share?
I think it's just a matter of staying curious and just following any path that you feel like is interesting. So long as I do that personally, I seem to still be interested in music. If I just constantly do the same thing over and over again and just stay to like a known method, I get really bored and start feeling like music is pointless. Like for example, I've got like more kick drums on my hard drive than I'll ever need. Like I've got all of the kick drums. I don't need any more kick drums. Yet, I just downloaded a new kick making plugin 2 days ago, and I was like, oh, cool, new way to make kick. Like it's stuff like that. Or like, like I don't need any more drum breaks. I've got every drum break there is. But today, before we jumped on here, I was using AI to generate drum breaks based off a folder of generative drum breaks I made with like some slicing thing in Ableton. And then I made like a big data set of drum breaks all at the same BPM and then pointed Dance Diffusion towards that to like generate a bunch. And like just random shit like that I find interesting from on a technical perspective, even though I don't need to do that anymore. Like every sound exists already on Splice and stuff. It's just important for me personally to do that to stay interested. And then I guess on the musical side of things, I'll always kind of find new musical ideas that I find interesting too, like, messing around in like a new mode or scale that I've never messed with, or messing around with like chiastic music. I can't remember what it's called, like where it constantly sounds like it's speeding up.
Oh, interesting.
Or Rizit rhythms. I can't remember what it's called, but stuff like just random shit like that, which is like, I know this piece of music's never going to get released probably, but it's just important for me to do because it keeps me interested. And yeah, really the product of all of my stuff all of my music is just this. Like it's just me being generally curious about new things and just trying stuff out. So I guess, yeah, my main piece of advice would to anyone who is having the issue of finding music to be stale and boring is to just find something about it that you think is interesting. And it's like a never ending rabbit hole. You can never learn everything about music. There's always a new musical technique or a new technical technique or a new sound design thing or a new arrangement style or whatever. Like there's just endless shit to learn about in music and you'll never learn all of it. So yeah, to me that's just what keeps me interested, and I don't think I'll ever hit the bounds of knowing everything about it. And even if I do, I will have forgotten about some shit that I learned earlier and then I'll relearn it and then that'll re-interest me. That's happened a few times too, where I've like learned a bunch about a thing, didn't do it for years, and then come back to it and it's completely new again because I've forgotten about it.
Yeah. So, I know exactly what you're talking about. And what I like about that idea you're saying now is that it's similar to what we were talking about earlier of a time before music was your job, where you're kind of just doing it for the passion, you're just for the interest. And I like that you said that, you'll work on something that is never going to get released, because it's that same thing. It's just exploring for exploring's sake without placing expectations on it. And I think in the modern era, that's maybe something younger producers aren't doing as much, because I think there is such a mentality that like, no, all of this has to fit into my perfect plan and we have to execute it, immediately. And there's kind of, no time to waste, when in fact, wasting time, quote unquote, might just be the thing that unlocks, whatever last creative piece you needed.
Yeah, I actually think I maybe misspoke there a bit. It's not necessarily making something that I know will for sure not be released, but it's like making something that I'm not like necessarily making to release. But quite often those things do turn into pieces of music, actually.
Sure. Yeah, I shouldn't have said it that way, but I guess the point to me is like, if you're working on something and it starts going in a way that is interesting, but maybe not commercially viable, at least for me, if I'm being, a good creative, it would be like, well, don't try to squash it. Don't try to, wrestle it into something else. As long as it's interesting, sort of follow the thread and kind of just see where it takes you.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a super important thing to do to feed your like creative part of your brain.
Well, dude, this is great. I mean, I feel like we could keep going for a long time here, but I'll let you get out of here for this round. I appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity. I'd love to have you on my podcast sometime too, if you're open to that.
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it, man.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me. This was great. And yeah, have a good day. And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.
Peace.